My father raised his glass at my brother's wedding and said, "We are so proud of the man standing before us today." He looked at my brother. He smiled at my new sister-in-law. He swept his gaze across every table in that barn, across the Edison bulbs strung between the rafters, across the long linen-covered tables, across the guests I'd helped seat and feed and pour drinks for, and never once looked at me. I had written the check for all of it. 40 minutes later, I stood up, set an envelope on the head table, and walked out through the barn doors into the Tennessee night. Before I reached my car, my phone lit up. By midnight, I had 47 missed calls. But that moment didn't come from nowhere. It was the last link in a very long chain. And if you're going to understand what happened in that barn, you need to know how the chain was built. I grew up in a 4-bedroom house in a suburb of Nashville, the kind of neighborhood where everyone mowed their lawns on the same day and waved from their driveways. My parents were decent people on the surface. My father worked in insurance. My mother kept the house and volunteered at school events. By every visible measurement, we were a normal family. My brother is 4 years younger than me, and he plays guitar. He has always been the kind of person who walks into a room and softens it. Easy smile, good stories, that particular gift for making people feel like they're the only one in the room. I don't say this with bitterness, it's just true. People love him. My parents loved him most. I figured that out the year I was 12. I had won a regional science and engineering competition, not the county fair kind, but a real competition run through the district with judges who came from firms downtown. I'd built a working model of a water filtration system from parts I ordered with my own saved birthday money. Placed first. The certificate was printed on heavy paper with gold embossing. I brought it home on a Friday afternoon. My father looked at it for about 4 seconds and said, "Good job, son." Then he turned to my brother, who was 8 years old and standing at the kitchen counter, and said, "Buddy, you left your cleats in the driveway again." We talked about this. The conversation moved to Little League, whether my brother needed new shin guards. I took the certificate to my room. It ended up in a box under my bed. I'm not sure what happened to it after that. I tried harder every year after that. There was some threshold I believed I could cross, some achievement significant enough that my parents would finally turn toward me the way they turned toward my brother. I graduated in the top 5 of my class. I got into the engineering program at the state university on a partial academic scholarship. At the dinner table that night, my father nodded and said he was proud. Then he asked my brother whether his guitar teacher had said anything about the recital. I understood by then that the turning would never happen. But understanding something and accepting it as final are different things. College was where I learned to live in the gap between what I was and what my family needed me to be. My first week on campus, I sat in the financial aid office going over numbers with a counselor who had kind eyes and a thick stack of folders. Between the scholarship, the loans I was willing to take on, and what I could earn working part-time, I could make it work, barely. I asked my parents during Thanksgiving break that fall whether they'd set aside any savings for school. My mother hesitated. My father said quietly that they had always planned to help both their boys equally. He said this while looking at the window. I found out the truth the following summer, home for break, when my mother asked me to pull a binder from the filing cabinet in the hallway closet. Inside, behind the car insurance documents and the utility payment history, there was a bank passbook. A savings account opened 14 years earlier, my brother's name at the top. Monthly deposits going back to before I started middle school. The balance was significant. I put the passbook back exactly where I'd found it. I handed my mother the binder and didn't say a word about any of it. I worked the entire time I was at school. 2 jobs my sophomore year, early morning shifts at a warehouse and evening hours doing data entry at a small law office downtown. I paid my share of the rent on the apartment I split with 2 other engineering students. I ate a lot of rice and got good grades and graduated with honors, having never once asked my parents for $1. The job offer came 3 weeks after graduation. Structural engineering firm in Nashville. I moved back to the city, not to my parents' house, but to a studio apartment on the 2nd floor of a building near the river that cost more than I thought reasonable and that I loved anyway because it was mine. 6 months in, the calls from home started. The first one was my mother, her voice careful and apologetic, explaining that the water heater had gone out, and the plumber was quoting $300, and they were short that month. Could I help? I could. I did. I told myself it was a one-time thing. I know how that sounds now, but I want to be honest about where my head was. I wanted to be useful. I wanted to matter to them in some way that didn't depend on outcompeting my brother for their attention. Sending money felt like finally having a role in the family I'd spent my whole life standing at the edge of. The requests gathered rhythm: a car repair, a medical bill, utilities in the months when my father's commission checks were late. My mother always called. My father rarely asked directly. He'd just be present on the call, adding context, explaining the logistics of why it was necessary. Within 2 years, I was sending $800 home every month like clockwork. When my brother finished his undergraduate degree and moved back while he figured out his next step, the number grew. He needed equipment for recording music. He needed a laptop. He needed a loan, temporary, they said, to cover the deposit on an apartment across town. I put my name on that loan agreement at a bank desk on a Tuesday afternoon, believing the word temporary. The loan was restructured 9 months later. My name stayed on it. When I called to discuss getting it removed, my father said the timing wasn't right and that family takes care of family, and the call ended. I bought my father a watch for his 60th birthday, a real one, not extravagant but quality. I wrapped it myself and wrote a note about how much I admired his work ethic. 3 months later, at a cousin's graduation party, I spotted it in a family photo taken that morning. It was sitting on the bookshelf behind my mother, holding down a stack of mail, not on my father's wrist. I took a photograph of the photograph with my phone. I'm not entirely sure why. I think some part of me just needed there to be a record of something. My brother got engaged in early spring. His fiancée is genuinely warm, the kind of person who remembers small things you mentioned months ago and follows up on them. I liked her from the first time we met. She is not part of what happened in any way that implicates her. She simply loved my brother, and my parents were thrilled about it, in a way they had never been about anything in my life. By late spring, they had chosen a venue, a renovated barn outside the city, the kind that costs more than it should because the photographs come out beautiful, and had begun making arrangements they had no way to fund. I know how the conversation happened because my mother called and said, with complete sincerity, "You've always been the stable one. Your brother has his music, but you have your career. You can help make this happen." She said it the way people say things they believe are fair observations rather than requests. Jerome, my closest friend from the firm, told me over beers that I didn't have to do it. He said it plainly the way he says most things. You're allowed to say no to your family. People do it. I already knew that, technically, but knowing something and believing it applies to you are different things. I paid for the wedding, the venue deposit, the catering contract, the florals, the bar, the photographer's retainer. When the situation with the rings became an issue, my brother's savings were thin, and my parents' finances were stretched. I covered that too, through an arrangement with my brother that we never put on paper and that I already understood would go the way these things always went. The total was more than I want to say here. What I'll say is that I opened a document on my laptop, a ledger I titled simply Record, and I logged every item with dates, amounts, and transfer confirmations, not to use against anyone, just to have a true account of things somewhere. The morning of the wedding, my mother texted to remind me to sit in the second row so my aunts could have the aisle seats. My father texted separately to say that if any of my coworkers were attending, I should keep the conversation light. "Tonight is about your brother," he wrote. "Don't make it about work." I stood in my bathroom with my tie half knotted, reading those messages. I felt something go very still in me. I finished getting dressed, slipped an envelope into my jacket pocket, and drove out to the barn. Jerome met me in the parking lot. He bumped my shoulder. "You good?" I told him I was fine. He gave me the look he gives when he doesn't believe me, the look of someone who has known you long enough to skip the part where you perform. The venue was beautiful. I can say that honestly. The Edison bulbs across the rafters, the long wooden tables, the flowers built exactly to spec. It all looked like what it was supposed to look like. I stood near the entrance and felt something complicated move through me. Pride was in there. Grief was in there. The particular ache of having built something beautiful that wasn't yours to inhabit. My brother cried at the altar. My parents stood in the front row, in the warm light, and I could see, from the second row where I'd been placed, how happy they were. I sat beside my aunt and felt the familiar sensation of being just outside a circle, pressing my palms against the glass. At the reception, Jerome found me at the bar and handed me something cold. "The flowers are incredible," he said. I nodded. Did you tell anyone you paid for them? I hadn't. He raised his glass without another word. My parents worked the room like hosts. My father told the story of my brother's first guitar to 3 separate groups of relatives, and each time it ended with a laugh he clearly enjoyed. A colleague of my father's, a man I'd met briefly once, found me near the dessert table and gestured at the room. Did you put all of this together? I said I'd helped. He started to say something more, but my father appeared and guided him away by the shoulder toward my brother before he could finish. I turned back to the table. I counted the items on it, 11. The toasts started at 8:30. My mother went first. She spoke about the day my brother was born, the quality of the light in the hospital room, how she had known immediately that he was something rare. She thanked my sister-in-law's family. She thanked the guests. She sat down. My father stood. He had prepared remarks but set them aside as if deciding to speak from the heart. He talked about legacy. He talked about what it meant to raise a son worth admiring. He said, "We always knew one of our boys was going to find his footing and build something real." He said it looking directly at my brother. He paused. He glanced around the room. His gaze passed over me like I was part of the decor. He raised his glass. The room raised theirs. Crystal rang through the barn. I sat with my hands in my lap. Jerome, across the table, was watching my face. Then my uncle, a big man with an honest face, seated 2 spots down, leaned forward and said to my father, "You've got 2 good sons. Your older boy put all of this together, didn't he?" He was smiling. He meant it as a compliment. My father's expression shifted the way weather shifts. He said, "Well, he contributed. This was a family effort." The tone was final, a topic being closed. My mother added quietly, "That's what older children do. That's just what family means." Someone changed the subject. The band started up in the corner. I sat there for another moment with my fingertips against the wooden table. I thought about the ledger on my laptop. I thought about the loan with my name on it. I thought about the passbook with my brother's name at the top. I thought about a watch sitting on a shelf under a stack of mail. I thought about the envelope in my jacket pocket that I had prepared 2 days earlier and then told myself I wouldn't use. I stood up. Jerome tracked me immediately. I shook my head, "Not your fight," and he stilled. I walked to the head table. My brother and his new wife looked up at me. I set the envelope gently on the white linen in front of my parents. "That's the itemized record," I said. My voice came out quieter than I expected but didn't waver. "Every vendor, every deposit, every transfer, with dates. You can go through it whenever you're ready." I looked at my brother. "I love you. I hope tonight is everything you wanted." I looked at his wife. "Take care of him." I turned and walked out. The gravel was loud under my shoes. The night was warm, frogs in the tree line, the band muffled behind me. I stood beside my car for a moment and let the distance settle. I drove home with the radio off. The first call came before I reached the highway. I watched the screen light up and let it ring through. They came faster after that. My mother, my father, numbers I didn't recognize. By the time I set the phone face down on my nightstand, the count had reached 47. I lay in the dark and listened to the city and felt something in my chest that I didn't have a clean word for. Not triumph. More like the feeling of a room after a long window has finally been opened. I went to work the next morning. I sat at my desk and opened a structural review I'd been delaying and worked through it with a focus that only comes when you've put something down you were carrying too long. Jerome appeared in my doorway at 10. He leaned on the frame for a moment without speaking. "Then, you okay?" I told him I thought so. He nodded. "Everyone at that table knew," he said. "They just didn't say it." I didn't need that to be true, but I appreciated hearing it. That evening, the lobby intercom buzzed. My mother's voice came through, composed in that careful way she gets when she is working to stay composed. "We're downstairs. We need to talk." I pressed the button. "I'll come down." I found them in the lobby, my father with his shoulders set, my mother with her hands folded. I stood on my side of the glass door and looked at them. I didn't hold it open. This conversation would happen here. My mother said I had embarrassed the family. She said that airing private matters at a wedding was not how we handled things, that what I did was selfish and theatrical. I let her finish. Then I took a folder from under my arm, printed pages, the full ledger, and held it out. My father took it. He opened it and turned pages slowly. My mother read over his arm. When he closed it and handed it back, his voice was measured. "This is what sons do for family," he said. "It isn't a transaction. It isn't a loan. That's what it means to be the older one. I had heard some version of this my entire adult life. I had let it settle into me and had grown around it and had accepted it as the shape of things. Standing in that lobby, holding 10 years in a folder, I felt it leave me. I know what you believe, I said. I'm telling you what I've decided. I'm not the family's account anymore. Not because I don't love you. Because this stopped being love a long time ago, and I'm the only one willing to say it out loud. My mother said my name the way she said it when I was small and late for something. Take care of yourselves, I said. I mean that. I went back inside and let the door close. I could hear their voices for a moment on the other side, then footsteps moving away, then nothing. I rode the elevator up and stood in my apartment in the dark, the city coming through the window in its usual way, orange and blue, and the slow pulse of traffic below. I set the folder on the counter. I didn't need to open it again. The thing about finally saying a true thing is that it doesn't always feel the way you expect. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels more like stepping out of cold water, quiet, relieved, a little hollowed out in the way that's necessary before anything can grow back. Jerome put together a dinner a few weeks later. 6 of us around a table in his place, mismatched plates, 2 bottles of wine that cost less than the feeling of being somewhere you actually belonged. My supervisor came. A friend from graduate school who'd moved to Nashville the year before. Jerome's sister who had a good laugh and held opinions about everything. At some point late in the night, Jerome raised his glass and said, "To people who show up, that was it, no flourish, just that." I raised mine. A month or so after the wedding, a text arrived from my brother, short, careful, the kind of message someone writes and rewrites before sending. He said he had known how much I was carrying. He said he hadn't said anything to our parents because he told himself it would only make things worse. He said he was sorry. I read it twice. I sat with it. I haven't responded yet. Not because I want to punish him. He's my brother, and that's its own kind of fact, separate from everything else. But some things deserve more than a quick reply, and I'm not ready for that conversation yet. Maybe I will be. What I know is this. I spent a long time inside a story that other people wrote for me. The older one, the responsible one, the one who handles things. I played that part so well for so long that I started to believe it was the only part I had. It wasn't. The ledger is still on my laptop. I don't open it, but I haven't deleted it either. I think I keep it for the same reason I kept that photo of the photo. Because somewhere in me needed a true record of things. I have one now. I'm the one writing it. If you have ever paid for the party and been thanked by nobody at it, I see you. The bill is not the measure of your worth. Neither is their silence. What you decide to do next, that's yours. The door is closed. The account is settled. And for the first time in longer than I can remember, the life ahead of me belongs entirely to me.